All right. We have a lot of problems in this country. We have economic problems, social problems, political problems, international problems, global problems. But my question tonight is, what is the root problem? Because if we're going to solve a problem, let's solve the root problem, right? Well, the people who are experts at complex systems, what they say is there's always a root problem, and the way you find it is first by finding the thing that works. First by rounding up the usual suspects. Okay, who do you usually blame for all of the problems? Okay, and then dig a little deeper, because the root problem is usually a little deeper. Now, we all love to blame politicians, right, for all of our problems. And that makes sense because they have their fingerprints all over all of our problems. But some people blame political parties because they force politicians to put special interests and party interests ahead of national interests. So maybe they're the root problem. Some people say no, it's actually the voters because ultimately we're in charge. We live in a democratic republic. We get the government we deserve. It's our fault. And some people say no, it's actually money. Money in politics because money corrupts the system. It buys power and influence. And so it makes our votes meaningless. Now these are all good candidates for what the root problem might be, but let's dig a little deeper. Politicians, they usually do what they're incentivized to do. Political parties, they always do what they're incentivized to do. We the voters, again, we usually do what we're incentivized to do. And money? Money does not have a mind of its own. It only ever does what its owners are incentivized to do. See the pattern? We don't have a political problem, as counterintuitive as that may seem. We have an incentive problem. We have a system of government where power matters more than results. And so we should not be surprised that we are all fighting for power. We are incentivized to fight for power, even though we rarely see results. This is our country's root problem. This is why we have two major political parties. One that promises amazing results, especially in the area of social justice, but they can't deliver. And another party that sees the lousy results and the burden on capitalism, and they promise to reduce the power in government and set our economy free, and they can't deliver either. Okay, so this is our root problem for all of our political problems as well. And if you think it's bad here, this power struggle, it's worse everywhere else in the world, or most everywhere else. So this is the cause of our international problems. This is why we can't come together maturely and discuss our global problems. This is the world's root problem. And humanity has been struggling with this root problem, the problem of power, for as long as we've been human. If you think about the definition of what it is to be human, it's to have this kind of power. So no wonder the root problem of humanity is this exact power struggle. How do we structure our competing interests? That's the root question, the root problem. Well, here's the good news. The good news is that humanity has solved this exact problem 3 times in history, in 3 different areas of government. And every single time, the solution was the same. We didn't recognize it as the same solution because we're solving different areas of government. But if we generalize the solution, it is the same solution every single time. And what does that mean? That means we don't have to invent the solution. It's already been invented. We just have to understand the solution. And we don't even have to prove that it works. As you'll see, we have hundreds of years of proof that the solution works. So what is the solution? The solution always is limits and transparency. Whenever there's a power struggle versus results, the answer is limits and transparency. And if you think about it, this makes sense. Because limits are going to force ambitious people to compete for things instead of just take things, right? And transparency is going to give the decision makers that are running around the information they need to make better decisions, to make results matter. These 2 things work together. You can't do either one alone, or it won't be sustainable, it won't work. But these 2 things working together do solve real-world problems. And let me give you the 3 examples. The first example is in our competition between individuals for resources, what we each own. If this competition is not structured right, power matters more than results, and we get jungle law. And jungle law sucks, okay, right? Okay, jungle law is where whoever has the most power can lie, cheat, steal, kidnap, rape, or kill. It's a pretty bad place. But if we structure this competition with limits and transparency in the form of property rights and money, people can judge the value of their investments and we get capitalism. Okay? Same battle, this is properly structured. And capitalism may have its faults, I admit that. But I think we can all agree that capitalism is infinitely better than living in jungle law. Second example. If we're going to have a country, we're going to have political resources. We're going to fight over those resources, those positions of power. And if that fight is unstructured, power matters more than results, and we get dictators. Okay? Not fun. But if we use limits and transparency in the form of elections and free speech, we can make better decisions, results start to matter, we get democratic republics. Again, these are not perfect, but isn't living in a democratic republic infinitely better than living under a dictator? Thank you. Third, good audience. Third example. If you're going to have nations, nations are going to want each other's resources. We can call foreign resources or national resources, whatever. If that fight between nations is unstructured, if there's not enough limits to hold the ambitious in check, you're going to have the incentive for conquest, where charismatic leaders can drum up an army and go invade places because they want to or can. But if we have strong national defenses and wise leaders that know how to use diplomacy properly, and this is the UN peacekeeping force, if we have countries coming together in support of peace, then we can have the incentive for peace, right? So what resources are we fighting about today? Because if we're correct here that this pattern is repeating itself, let's follow the pattern. What are the resources we're fighting about politically? Well, I think it's our collective resources, meaning the government resources. All of our tax money goes into the government, and now it's sitting there. What do we do with it? How big should government be? These are the issues we're fighting over. And until now, we haven't had a really good answer that everyone could say, yeah, that makes sense. But now let's apply limits and transparency to this problem and see what we get. What we get is a government reform called cap and prioritize. Okay, cap and prioritize. You heard it here first. Cap and prioritize. Now, the reason for the cap is twofold. First, so that we can guarantee fiscal sustainability. Okay, I think most of us in the room can agree that that's kind of a minimum. We want to be fiscally sustainable, and a cap is going to help that. The second reason for a cap is to force everyone who wants something from government to compete for it. Okay, no fair letting government go and take more resources just because it wants to or because it has a good idea. Of course there's good ideas. But there's an abundance of good ideas, but what we need are the best ideas. How do we make results matter? Well, that's where the prioritizing comes in. And what I mean by prioritizing here is we're going to take what's left after the cap. We're still talking about trillions and trillions of dollars here. We're going to take what's left after the cap, and we're going to force Congress somehow, we'll talk about how in a minute, to actually prioritize this budget, each of its budgets, so that it's going to rank all the spending from top to bottom. So all the most important stuff is on top, and all the least important stuff, the waste, fraud, and abuse, is exposed on the bottom. This might sound impossible to do, but think of the benefits. For example, in social spending, if we were to do this, who's going to win the prioritized budget fight in social spending? The powerful people or the people who need help most? People who need help most. Yes, thank you, audience. What kind of ideas are going to win that transparent, prioritized fight? The ideas that actually get results. In other words, what we're doing here is we are using right-leaning limits plus transparency, priority transparency, to force the government to pursue social justice efficiently and effectively. This is where your head explodes. Okay? We are uniting freedom and fairness here. Now, to help you understand this, let's go into more detail, because you might think that's impossible. We can't pass a spending cap to save our lives, and the idea of Congress prioritizing a budget must seem absolutely impossible because they don't even want to publish a budget. But the first hint that is possible is that different government budgets are going to have different caps and different ways of prioritizing. So we can divide and conquer the problem. For example, defense spending is going to have probably one cap during peacetime and probably no preset cap during wartime. And probably the Pentagon will do most of the prioritizing. That's kind of how it works today. But when it comes to social spending, we can imagine a different need. Maybe a cap that allows government spending to grow a little bit every year, something sustainable. And then within that cap, we're going to be prioritizing to see how we can help people the most. Now, should Congress do the prioritizing? It's not prioritizing the defense budget primarily, so it doesn't have to. Who could prioritize it better than Congress? I think the answer, people, maybe the states. Okay, maybe there's more than one answer. I don't know. okay? But I know it's not Congress. And, and the reason I know that is that imagine if Congress was tasked with the mission to prioritize, to rank all of the college football teams in the country. Okay? There would be riots in the streets and people would die. Okay? Right? Right. Okay? That would happen. So maybe Congress is the wrong level of government to do this prioritizing. What if Congress took this capped budget that it now has, divided it up among the 50 states, and then said, here, states, here's the money you now have to help people. And there's no strings attached except for one big string. You've got to either prioritize the budget to some minimum standard or give the money back to the people in proportion to how they pay taxes. Okay? That would effectively force the states to think seriously about how to prioritize that money. We'd have 50 different experiments for how to do it. And the proof that the states can do it is that one state is the state of Oregon. It's a very left-leaning state, and they prioritize their Medicaid and have for 20 years. Okay? So this is not a left or a right thing. This is about what works. And let's go into more details. Let's imagine that we're going to take the social spending and prioritize it with cap it with a population plus inflation cap. Now this is a pretty aggressive cap as far as what's politically viable today. Colorado has something kind of like this. Florida tried to. California, I think, used to. So it's not totally out of line here, but it's pretty hard to think of this happening. Now the political right loves this kind of cap. Now what this cap does is it allows government spending to grow every year with population plus inflation. And the political right loves this kind of cap because the economy grows faster. So that means the size of government as a percentage of our economy constantly shrinks. That's why they love this cap. And the way they try to sell this cap to everyone else is they say, hey, if you want to help people through government, don't worry. We're going to keep the spending power the same. So we can always help people as well as we're helping them right now. Okay? Now that's not a convincing argument because people want to help people more than we're helping them right now. And that's where the prioritizing comes in. If we can keep spending power the same over time, and then we add in the idea of transparent prioritizing where results start to matter, then we have cap and prioritize, and we can start to see constant improvement towards social justice. Now the important thing to look at in this little chart here is that each of these three lines is guaranteed. The green line is guaranteed because we say so with the cap that we've chosen. The red line is guaranteed because historically the economy grows faster than that. And the blue line is guaranteed because of the math. If we're keeping spending power the same and prioritizing, we will see constant improvement. This is another place where your head might explode. What we're doing here is we are economizing our collective resources. We're finding the highest and best use for our collective resources. This is like the mirror image of capitalism. If you tax this economy, government shrinks. Okay, it's really mind-blowing. I wish I had 5 hours to talk about it, but we don't. So what I'm going to say here is that this social justice economy that sets capitalism free, we need a name for it, right? Now what are we fighting about in this economy? We're fighting about priorities. So the name of this economy is called priorityism. Priorityism, it just rolls off the tongue. Priorityism. The social justice economy that sets capitalism free. Okay, this, I believe, is an idea worth spreading. And this is more than just the birth of a new economy. This is actually the birth of a new political philosophy. Not a left philosophy or a right philosophy, a more mature philosophy that respects freedom, fairness, and common sense all at the same time. Now, the three pillars of modern society are capitalism, which economizes individual resources, democracy, which economizes political resources, and national defense, with diplomacy helps economize foreign resources. Now we're economizing collective resources. This is the philosophical peer to capitalism, democracy, national defense. This is huge, people. I hope you get that. Okay? This is absolutely huge. And we can predict the next economy that we're going to have to invent. Because imagine a whole world, as this spreads around, as countries adopt this, imagine the whole world largely at peace, with capitalism chewing through resources as quickly as it can. Technology may help change that, it might make it worse. What are we going to have to do then? Fight about what resources we leave for the future. We will start arguing about a new class of resources, future resources. Some people are arguing about it right now, but they need a global solution. That's what we can do after this happens. Okay, so now we can imagine a new philosophy. I call it pentanomics. Penta meaning 5, nomics meaning economics. because good government is 5 economies. Okay, the 3 that we use right now today actively, plus priorityism, plus this new cap and trade economy that we can imagine in the future at a global level. Good government is 5 economies. And every philosophy should be able to be summarized on a bumper sticker, right? Okay, so GG equals 5E. Okay, good government is 5 economies. That's a bumper sticker right there. A t-shirt, baseball cap, whatever. Now, GG equals 5E is not as sexy as E equals MC squared. Okay, I admit that. But I believe, honestly, this will be as transformative in time. Because what we're talking about here is the proper structuring of all human conflict. And just to be clear, we are not taking the idealistic position that we can eliminate conflict. That's silly. What we are doing here is we are properly structuring all human conflict based on hundreds of years of real-world proof. Okay? So we've done it 3 times before, basically. Let's do it 2 more times, and we're largely done. The rest is details. So we can imagine a future now where our economy is truly set free. We can imagine where we have the social justice economy, helping people who need help most and helping them better and better all the time. We can imagine our political conflict moving on to another topic. We'll still argue about something, but not this. We can imagine other countries copying us, just like they did with capitalism and democracy and so on, and solving our international problems. And we can imagine a world largely at peace, ready and mature enough to solve our global problems. And so if we are going to solve one problem, let's solve humanity's root problem. Let's solve the problem we've been arguing about for 10,000 years or more. Let's make results matter more than power. Thank you.